You know, we've been in this Wonder series for 9 weeks, and it's been an amazing series. I'm just going to go out and say, Pastor Steph, that this is my favorite series by far that we've done here at the church so far. Don't you think you'll think it was good? It's awesome. And Pastor Steph was like, hey, you should jump in this. This would be good. And I was like, I don't even know what to talk about. Like, you've been saying it all, It's just been so good. It's been so refreshing. And I really felt today I wanted to talk to you guys about something that's been going on in my life and a breakthrough that I've had in my life in this area. And I hope that it can help some people, as I navigate being a pastor and talking to people about their walks with God. This subject comes up so often. And, I've given a lot of good advice about it, but I've recently lived it. And so how many of y'all know that an experience and living something is better than having a good idea about it, right? So I just want to take you guys on this journey of something that's been going on in my life. And it really, really parallels to this story that I just told you. And so the title of my message today is Worship and Wonder. And, I've been speaking for a little over a year on and off, and you would think that I would do at least one talk on worship, right? That's what I do, right? I have never done a talk on worship before, and this isn't actually a talk on worship. So, but it's called that. So, but it's not at all about worship. So, there you go. So, something that's I find is really, really plaguing our society these days is distraction. It's so easy to get distracted. I think we're in the most distracted times of our lives. I know that I'm super distracted, and I have my wife will say that I have a little ADHD in me, a little ADD, but I don't believe it, but I probably do. But she says that I'm always distracted, and I think it's this day and age of society. I think that our phones having infinite information at our fingertips has led us to exploration. And exploration is a good thing, but exploration can be a thing that becomes very, very distracting. You know what I'm saying? So this story is much about that. And this thing that's been going on in my life is much about that. I've been very, very distracted in my life. And about a month ago now, I guess, me and my wife, we went on a vacation. And thank the Lord for vacations. And some amazing, amazing things happened during that vacation. And I'm going to share those with you the next few minutes that we have together. But, I was trying to figure out a story in the Bible to kind of parallel this. And so this story really, really parallels what I've kind of been going through in my life. So as the Lord showed it to me, it really, really kind of made sense. So there were two sisters, right? Mary and Martha. And their brother was Lazarus. And if you've been around church at any amount of time, you know a lot about Lazarus, right? He's the guy that came out of the tomb, right? They do whole plays about it where the smoke and he comes out and all this stuff. But in this instance, they talk about Mary and Martha. And it's not Mary, the mother of Jesus. It's Mary, another Mary, right? So in the story, Mary and Martha are sisters, okay? And they're mentioned 3 times in the scriptures. Mary and Martha are mentioned 3 times in the scriptures. And I didn't know a better way to do this, but we're going to get into teaching mode today, and then we're going to get into preaching mode later. But I really want to spend a couple of minutes and kind of compare and contrast Martha and Mary's story, because they're together the entire time. In all 3 places that they're mentioned, they're together, but they have totally opposite reactions to what's happening in their life, right? So, just like those scriptures said, so Jesus came to their house, right? And Mary sat down attentively before the master and absorbed every revelation that he shared. But Martha became just busy with finishing the numerous household chores in preparation for her guests, right? So I wrote down some notes here to compare and contrast. So Mary sat at the feet of Jesus, right? She was attentive to what he was doing, and she absorbed every revelation that he shared. If you're new to church and you're like, what's a revelation? Revelation is pure wisdom. That's what revelation is. It's the truth. That's what you want in your life. There's a lot of really, really good thoughts, but once you get a revelation on something, you'll never be the same in that area of your life. And that's what we're really looking for when we're praying to God, right? You just don't want a good answer, you want the God answer, right? We just don't want a good answer, we want what God says about it, right? So that's what revelation is. So she was absorbing every revelation that he shared. And Jesus' response to Mary's posture was the same. He tells her at the end of this, he even tells everybody around like what he's talking about. He said, Mary discovered the one thing that's most important. She did it. She figured out the one thing that's most important. And he even says, Mary is undistracted towards me. And then he tells Martha, he goes, hey, listen, I'm not going to take this away from her. Mary chose the right portion, you know? And I got this idea of like a pie chart, right? And there's portions in the pie chart. But I don't want to, as I'm saying this, I don't want to make it feel like what Martha was doing wasn't important, because what Martha was doing was important. But in that moment, probably wasn't the right portion. Does that make sense? So that's how Mary interacted in this scene, right? Okay, so Martha was pretty much the opposite, right? So Martha was finishing numerous household chores in preparation. I get that. I have a wife, okay? I get that. Men in here that have wives. Like, it's pretty much a sin if like I'm hanging out with one of my friends, right? I'm sure y'all done this before. And like, hey, yo, you want to go over to my house? And like, yeah. And then you're on the way to the house and you call your wife, you're like, hey, me and So-So are going to swing by the house. And she's like, I'm sorry, who? And I'm like, me and So-So? And she's like, he can't come over. And I'm like, why not? He's like, the house isn't prepared for somebody to come over. I was like, pick up a few things. Like, what's the big deal? And she's like, what's the big deal? There's somebody coming over the house. You didn't give me enough notice. I got to do the dishes. I got to do the laundry. I got to mop the floors. I got to clean everything, right? So I know what it's like to want to get things prepared, right? So this is where Martha was, right? She was exasperated. That's what the scriptures say. And here's the other part about it, is she was so unaware of the revelation being taught that she interrupts Jesus mid-sentence, right? Who wants to do that, right? The creator of the universe is sitting down, having a fireside chat with somebody and revealing all the wonders of the world, and you interrupt them with complaining. That's good, right? But that's where Mary was. So she interrupted the revelations to complain. She had a it's not fair attitude, right? She even says, hey, I don't think it's fair that my sister gets to sit here and absorb all this revelation. How convenient. Why everything else needs to be done. Could you do me a favor? Could you stop what you're doing for a second and like reprimand her, right? Like Jesus knows her name, but she didn't even call her name. That sister of mine, that's what she says, right? She didn't even call her by a name. She's so mad at her, she didn't even call her by a name. She's like, that sister of mine, why don't you get her in line, right? How many times have we been like that in our lives, right? That's it, reading the mail. But how many times have we been like that? Hey, Jesus, hey, real quick. I realize that I'm supposed to be worshiping you, but there's somebody in my life that really needs you, right? Could you just real quick, just stop what you're doing right now and go fix them, right? We all got people in our lives like that, don't we? Hey, listen, I feel like I'm doing my part. They're not doing their part, so if you could just go fix them, right, this would be okay. Y'all still aren't with me. Okay, so I've done some marriage counseling in my life, and it usually goes about like this. One of the two come up to me and go, Pastor Wes, do you do marriage counseling? And I'll be like, yeah, every once in a while. They're like, okay, good, because I'm bringing the other half of me, and you need to let them know that they're wrong. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'll see what I can do. But that's what they want, right? That's what they want. Hey, could you take this other piece and then go let them know how wrong they are in this situation? But that's where she was in her life, right? I wrote down that she was striving. She felt the need to do something for Jesus. And this is Jesus' response to Martha. This is very interesting. He points out how troubled she is. He's like, man, Martha. It actually says, Martha, beloved Martha. And the scriptures in that, it explains that. And it said he was gently correcting her. Like, Martha, hey. And he sees that she's upset and she's troubled. And he says, you're pulled away from me with many distractions. That's what it says. You're pulled away. You're not having the right perspective here, right? I get it. There's lots of stuff that needs to be done, and you're really upset with you're not getting any help. But you're pulled away with distraction. And it says, then he asked her a question, is really what you're doing that important? Right? Is really what you're doing that important? Or are you missing it a little bit? And I think that so many times that's where we're at. We're at a place that we're distracted, and then we're at a place where we feel pulled away, right? Especially this day and age with so much information coming at us. It's so easy to get pulled away and get distracted and not live in the moment. I wrote down here, Jesus' response to Martha was he was really trying to ask her, what's her value system, right? What's her value system here? Is your value system the things, or is your value system the one? Because obviously with what he was saying, is all this stuff really important? So he must not have put it of as importance as sitting at his feet, right? So that's one of the scenes, right, that you see Mary and Martha. And that's really how it starts. Then the next two start where those picked off. So the next one is the most famous one that you hear about, is the scene with Lazarus in it. So like I said, if you've been around at any point, you know the story of Lazarus. But now knowing that Mary and Martha are that's their sisters, like it's really interesting to see how they interact with Jesus as this moment is happening, right? So let's pick up in John here. It's a really cool story. And you see their personalities come out in this story. So Lazarus is really sick, right? And it says that Jesus loved Lazarus. That's what it says. So the sisters, knowing that Jesus loves Lazarus, is like, hey, we need to send a note to Jesus, letting him know that Lazarus is sick. So here we're going to pick up on verse number 3 here in chapter 11. It says, so the sisters sent a message to Jesus. Lord, our brother Lazarus, the one you love, is very sick. Please come! ! So it was of great importance, right? So it says, when he heard this, he said, the sickness will not end in death for Lazarus, but it will bring glory to God and praise to God. This will reveal the greatness of the Son of God by what takes place. Now, even though Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, he remained where he was for 2 days, right? So then finally, on the third day, he said to the disciples, come, it's time to go to Bethany. So this is one translation of it. Another translation of it says, Jesus says, oh yeah, no, I love Lazarus. I'm going to stay here 2 more days. Like, if you love somebody and they're about to die, like that's probably not your first response, right? Like, man, oh, this is bad. Like, ! Lazarus is really sick. This is bad. You need to come. And he's like, oh man, I love Lazarus. I think he's great. Hey, let's hang out here for 2 more days. You probably wouldn't do that, right? If you really loved the person that was really, really sick. And not only do you love that person, you have the ability to heal them instantly, you probably wouldn't stick around for 2 more days, right? Are y'all with me? So, verse 17, so he picks up. So Jesus is walking there, and he's walking there, and he's almost to the city. He's 2 miles out of the city, and guess who comes running up? Martha comes running up. Doesn't even let him get to the city. All right? This is our Martha, right? Why don't you get somebody to help me? Can't you see how bad this is. Oh, Jesus is almost here? Well, let me bypass Jesus and meet him 2 miles out, right? And let him know what I think about this situation. I'm not afraid to interrupt him when he's throwing revelation around, much less walking. So they arrived, and they were about 2 miles out, and Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. And many friends of Mary and Martha had come to the region and to console them over the loss of their brother. And when Martha heard that Jesus was approaching the village, she went out to meet him. But Mary stayed in the house. Here's a couple. So Martha ran out to meet him. Mary stayed where she was, right? So Martha says to Jesus, "My Lord, if you had only come sooner, our brother wouldn't have died. But I know that if you were to ask God for anything, he would do it for you." And Jesus told her, "Your brother will rise and he will live." And she says, "Yes, I know he will rise with everyone else in the resurrection day." Like, she doesn't really get what he's talking about, right? So let's flip over a little further. So Jesus is like, okay, you're not really getting what I'm saying. Like, go get Mary. Like, where's Mary at? So she goes and she talks to Mary, and she's like, "Hey, the master wants you." So that's when Mary gets up from where she was and comes out to where they are. Mary stayed where she was until she was summoned. Martha ran out and met Jesus 2 miles out. So then, so we go a little further because this is a really long story. So when Jesus looked at Mary and he saw her, she fell at his feet and she said, "Lord, if you would have just been here, my brother would not have died." Now, she said the same thing as Mary, right? She said the same thing as Mary. She just said it in a totally different posture as Mary, right? So then when Jesus saw Mary and saw her weeping at his feet and all of her friends who knew she was grieving, he shuddered with emotion. This is Jesus. And she was deeply moved with tenderness and compassion. This is also the shortest right here. This is a different translation, but this is the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept, right? When Martha talked to him, he said, "Go get Mary." But when Mary talked to him, he wept and had compassion. So it goes on and it says, okay, so I'm gonna get Lazarus out of the grave. Listen, go roll the stone away. And he tells Martha to go roll the stone away. And this is what Martha says to him. What does it say? And then Martha says, "But Lord, it's been 4 days since he's died. By now he's already decomposing." And he looks at her and he said, "Didn't I tell you that if you would just believe in me, you would see God unveil his power? Didn't I tell you something already?" Like, you're still questioning me, right? Like, you know something that I don't know. I don't think I'd ask you to roll the stone away if it was any other way than it is, but you're still questioning what I'm doing, right? And then so after that, Lazarus comes out. It's an amazing, amazing thing. But what I really wanted to focus here on is Martha's posture versus Mary's posture, right? So I wrote a few notes here. The interesting part about it is they both wanted Jesus to come. They sent a letter, right? But Mary waited in the house for the arrival of Jesus and didn't move until Jesus called for her, right? Mary, on the other hand, knew that Jesus was coming and got word and bypassed Jesus, right? I'm not gonna let him walk 2 more miles. I got stuff to say to this guy, right? Why would you wait so long to get here? If you would have done something else, right? If you would have just came sooner, none of this would have happened, Jesus, right? How many times is that our posture in our lives, right? Something goes on and we send a petition to Jesus and Jesus, help us. And the moment it doesn't turn out the way that we think it should, we start running out to Jesus going, "Hey, if you would just hurry up a little bit," right? "I don't know what took you so long over there. It's been 4 days, man. We needed you 4 days ago. How convenient that you're showing up now," right? How many times is that our posture towards Jesus in our life? Like, we have something to do with controlling Jesus somehow, right? But Mary took the posture of, "No, I'm gonna sit here and wait. I'm gonna sit here and wait till he gets here. And then he'll know what to do." So it was only till Martha came and grabbed Mary and said, "Hey, come out here," that she moved. Always important to stay where you're at till God says elsewhere. So Jesus' response to Mary Because here's the deal. This is my note. It said, was Jesus' response to Mary. I paraphrased it, but he's like, I'm glad you stayed where you are so that I could show you the kingdom. That's what he was trying to tell everybody. He's like, hey, listen, he's not dead. He's just sleeping, okay? So, but this is good because I'm going to show you guys something. I'm going to show you I have the power over the grave by resurrecting this guy, okay? But I need you to wait on it. And they weren't willing to wait. But Mary was. Also, thank you for coming when I call. When he saw, like I said a minute ago, when he saw Mary, he was moved with compassion and he wept. And then he goes, hey, where's he at? I'm ready to do the miracle, right? Martha's wasn't. She wanted to see Jesus ASAP. She ran out to meet Jesus before he even arrived at the city. We talked about that. If you would have just came sooner, it's been 4 days. Jesus' response to Martha's posture was very instructional at all times. Where when Jesus saw Mary, he was very, very compassionate. He had lots of compassion. But with Martha, he was very instructional. Like, hey, go get your sister. Hey, move that stone. Hey. Because every time that he told her to do something, she had something else to say about it. She didn't think that he knew what he was doing. She thought that she knew better than him, right? And after it's all said and done, he says, hey, like, why do you keep doubting me, right? Like, I can't do this. You keep doubting me. That's her posture towards him. So that's the second time that you see Mary and Martha. And here's the third one, because it's really, really short. So Lazarus raises from the grave, right? And then right before Jesus is going to be crucified, 6 days before, he goes back over to Lazarus' house, and Mary and Martha are there. So we're going to pick up in John 12. And this is what it says. And I'm going to bring scriptures in John, and I'm going to bring scriptures in Matthew together so that you can see the full picture. They both talk about it. They both have different depictions of what happened, different angles. But bringing them two together, you can really see how this works together. So it says in John 12, it says, in 6 days before the Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave dinner there. Martha served. There's when it mentions Martha. And Lazarus was one reclining at the table. And Mary therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of perfume. So here we go. We still got Martha, and she's still serving, right? But then we have Mary, who comes with ointment. And different translations of it say they broke ointment over Jesus, and it poured over his head, and she anointed him, right? And Martha didn't get it. The disciples didn't get it. Nobody got it, right? The disciples were like, whoa, man, like this girl's crazy. Like there was like 300 money worth of ointment that she just wasted on this guy, right? Like, why would you do that? You know how much stuff we could do with that? We could do so much with that. And this is what Jesus says. And this is, he says this to him in Matthew 10. And it says, why do you trouble this woman? For she has done a beautiful thing to me. For you have always had the poor with you, but I will not be with you always. In pouring this ointment on my body, she has done it to prepare me for burial. Truly I say to you, whenever the gospel is proclaimed in the world, that what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Wow, right? Such an amazing statement that Jesus makes about Mary and the sacrifice that she did for him. He's like, whoa, listen, you guys over here, like, listen, she's done such an amazing thing. She even mentions that he's going to be buried. He was like, what she did for me is so great that it's going to be written in history books. People are going to remember Mary's name for what she did for me. That is an amazing ending to the scriptures and into Mary and Martha's narrative in the scriptures, right? It's such a really cool a way to display the idea of Mary and Martha, because Mary and Martha were they were sisters and they lived together. In every one of those scenarios, they both were in it, but they both took opposite reactions to what was going on in their life, right? And I hope I did an okay job of setting that up for you guys. I didn't know really the best way to do that, but I hope y'all understood what I was trying to do, the compare and contrast thing with each one of them in what they were doing. I wrote some notes here, but it kind of says it all. And then I wrote Jesus' response to Martha, like nothing was recorded. He didn't even talk to her. It just said that Mary was doing some serving for Jesus, right? So it really made me think, and the reason I told this story is because it's really a thing that has been going on in my life for a little while. And I really wanted to share this with you, that I had this experience that, it's so easy in our life to get distracted, and it's so easy in our life to get busy, right? And, even as a pastor at a church, you can get into a place where you're busy all the time and you're very, very distracted, right? And here's the thing about it. Is that what Martha did wasn't bad, right? Like, we can all agree that, like, getting the house ready for Jesus to come over isn't a bad thing, right? Even as I say distracted, you might think in your head, oh, well, he was doing some sin or whatever it was. No. I was doing the things of God, and God was always with me of the things I was doing. I just felt pulled away a little bit. Does that make sense? Mary and Martha were in the house with Jesus, right? That's a good place to be, right? Just one of them chose the right portion and one of them chose the not so right portion, right? And what I found in my life is I'd come to this place in my life where I'd been pulled away. And as soon as I took a step back and sat at the feet of Jesus for a minute, I realized how distracted I was. And I realized how pulled away that I was. And it changed my life. We talk about the presence of God a lot at church, and it's a really, really important thing in your life, the presence of God. And if you're not careful, you can go on and miss it pretty easy if you're not really, really intent and strategic about seeking the presence of God in your life. It's just like the Mary and Martha thing. Just like I said, Mary and Martha were doing great things, right? They were both with Jesus in the house. Like, that's where I want to be. But one of them chose to sit at his feet for a minute. And one of them chose to get really, really busy. Because Jesus was speaking, and he was speaking revelation. But depending on your posture is whether you get that revelation or not. And I find so many times in our life, as things happen and life goes on, that we just get busy and we just get distracted. We were at that conference, and I forgot his name. Benny Hinn. How do you forget Benny Hinn's name? But his daughter was there, and she talked about being in the ministry and Benny Hinn. And if you don't know who Benny Hinn is, he is one of the biggest evangelists of all time. And she was like, I was doing things for God, and then all of a sudden I just kept getting busy. And then I walked in one day, and I didn't even want to go to church anymore. And she was like, and that was a bad spot to be in. You know what I mean? That you wouldn't want to even go to church anymore. But I realized that I had gotten distracted, and what I did is I set myself apart for a little bit and got myself back on track. And now God's more refreshing to me than ever. It's just amazing the journey that I've been on since that moment. But even I get distracted, And they were talking about it at that conference, and I was like, man, Benny Hinn's daughter can get distracted like that, and they have a worldwide ministry and things like that. Am I distracted? And the answer to the question was yes. The answer to the question is that I was being Martha, So many pieces of my life I was being Martha. It wasn't that I wasn't doing something for God and I was putting my best foot forward, but I just wasn't choosing the right portion, So the right portion, what Jesus was talking about, is seeking the presence of God in your life. And I wrote some notes about it, but I'm going to paraphrase them because it's a lot. But, there's a really big difference between, and this is what I've found, is there's a really big difference between the presence of God and the knowledge of God. And when I first became a Christian, I had a lot of knowledge of God. And so I'm sure you all have been there at some point in your life where when you first become a Christian, I would debate the scriptures with a lot of people, right? Because I had a lot of knowledge about God. And I would be like, okay, I've got some knowledge about God. He died for me, all this stuff. And then you would run into somebody who doesn't believe in God. And then you would be like, you need to believe in God. And they'd be like, why? And I'd be like, because he died for you. Look, it says it in this book right here. And they're like, well, I don't believe your book. And it's like, well, that goes out the window real quick. Right? How many of y'all done that before? I've done that many a times. It was a very frustrating thing in my life. I'd be like, no, I'm telling people about Jesus. Look, right here in the scriptures, John 3:16. He loves you, he died for you. And they're like, I don't believe your book. And it's like, okay, well, but it's really old. And they're like, yeah, so, but it's got really good stuff in it. And they're like, so? And I'm like, well, that doesn't go anywhere. You know what I'm saying? And that was literally how a big portion of my life was at the beginning, until I had an experience with God. Till I had an experience with God where I was literally, I'll never forget the experiences I've had with God where I've met God face to face. And it changed me forever. You know, I was at a wedding the other day, and a friend that I hadn't seen in a really long time, he came up to me and he started talking to me about Jesus, and he doesn't go to church, and he was like, hey man, listen, your church thing, blah, blah, blah. I was like, no, it's cool. Everybody's on their own journey. It's cool. He's like, yeah, well, just let me tell you something real quick. And I said, okay. He goes, listen, I've tried the church thing before. And I was like, okay. And he's like, you know, you get in there and they say, okay, everybody stand up. Let's read this hymn, and everybody sings off key, and it's really awkward. And then like somebody gets up there and they have really good stuff to say, man, but nothing happens. And I was like, okay. And he goes, but you know what? I know that there is a God. And I was like, okay, how do you know that? He was like, my friend was in the army, and he said, I did a few tours of Iraq, and there were chaplains there. And I was like, okay. And he was like, and this one time, and he was like, but it was much the same. It was this thing. He was like, but this one time, they were like, hey, we're gonna have a tent service. So they did. He was like, in the moment that I walked inside of the tent, I knew that God exists. And I was like, how did you know that? He was like, I was flooded, overwhelmingly flooded with the love of God. He's like, I can't explain it. I stood there for I don't know how long. It felt like hours. I just stood there. And people were clapping and people were shouting and they were banging on stuff. He was like, I couldn't even move. I was so in awe of what was going on that I know there's a creator now. And I was like, wow, that is an amazing, amazing thing. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, you know what also is really cool about that is that no one could ever tell you that didn't happen, right? No one could ever tell you, hey, that isn't true. No one could ever tell you, hey, what you felt wasn't reality. It was just there's nothing somebody could do to tell you that experience that you had with God was false. And he goes, yeah, know that. And actually, now that you think about it, there's nothing anybody could tell me. I know that God exists. I was like, that's what it's all about right there, man. I was like, I don't stand with you here at this wedding because I can debate the scriptures really good, and I feel like the scriptures, the validity of the scriptures are what it's at. I stand here with you today because of a series of encounters just like that one that I had. And I have. And I said, but I want to encourage you. He goes, yeah, well, that's cool, man. Well, I don't think you can recreate that. You know, it was just that time. It was just that moment where I was with God, and it was in Iraq, and it was the tent and all those people and all that stuff. I was like, no, man. I want to encourage you. That's available to you every single day of your life. That's available to you every single day of your life if you search for it. Because the scriptures say, Jesus says, hey, listen, I'm going to go away, and it's best that I go away. Now, if I was hanging with Jesus, And I had him in the flesh right here. Him going away is not the best thing for me, right? It's not the best thing for me. But he's like, no, listen. I'm going to go away and I'm going to send somebody greater than me. Because up to this point, I mean, this is what the scriptures are about right here. The presence of God. In Genesis 1, God created Adam and he walked with him and he talked with him and he communed with him and he had face-to-face encounters with Adam. And that's what the scriptures are all about. Face-to-face encounters with God. And that's what God is trying to do by sending his son Jesus. Since we screwed it up and Adam screwed it up, he had to live in a box. And they carried the presence of God around in a box. And they camped around the presence of God everywhere that it went. And then God goes, I'm going to do something better than that. I'm going to send my son and I'm going to give them the presence of God to live inside of them. No longer do you have to camp around it. No, it's going to live inside of you.
Start playing, I'm gonna walk your volume in.
It's going to live inside of you. And I'm going to send him. Don't move. Don't move till he comes. That's what he said. He said, I'm going to go away, and you guys don't go anywhere until he comes, and you'll know it. And there were like 500 people there who heard him say that, and only 120 stayed around. I always wonder about those other 380. But the idea is that he came. And his spirit filled the earth and filled man so that we would never have to be without him. And that presence can be with us always. And that's where life really starts, in the presence of God. Everything changes in the presence of God. The impossible things become possible in the presence of God. And that's what it's all about. So I knew that. I've had encounters with God my entire life. I knew that, but I just got distracted. And then when I came back and I got in the presence of God, everything changed. You know, I battled anxiety for a long time in my life, a really long time. And it was, I never got actual medication for it, but I got a natural herbal pill for it. And I was taking it 3 times a day. My anxiety was through the roof. And me and Kelly, we were battling something in our marriage. And you know, you got like those 5 topics in your marriage that you just don't bring up because they go nowhere, right? So you just sweep them back under the rug. It comes up, something comes up, and you just sweep it back under the rug. And when we went on that trip, the first day that came up, and we sat in the hotel room arguing with each other as we're on vacation. And you know, I'd gotten some great counseling about that. I have great friends who have great advice. I've read books. I've prayed. I've done everything that I can possibly know to do to fix this problem that we were having in our marriage. You know the one thing I did not do? I did not do this. I did not take some time, get in the presence of God, and wait till I could feel him tangibly and ask him about it. I never did that. Not even one time. We were at that conference, and I just had some time to reflect. And I got in the presence of God, and I asked him the question, and he immediately gave me the answer. Immediately gave me the answer. It was a light bulb revelation moment. And I was like, oh my God, that's it. So we went back after that later, and I told her the answer to the question, and it resonated with her, and we've never had that problem again. That's amazing. Set free. And you know that pill that I was taking, it's an extract of a leaf. And if you take too much of it, it makes you sick. It makes you feel bad. So we were on, it was probably like day 3 of the conference. And I was going to take it, and I took it, and it made me feel bad. I was like, oh, this isn't good. I'm not going to take this for a while. So I went a few days, and I didn't take it. And then I came home and I'd realized I hadn't taken it in 9 days. I hadn't taken it in 9 days. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've been living off this for like 3 times a day. And I haven't taken it in 9 days. And then I realized I don't need it anymore. My anxiety's gone. I haven't taken it since. I'm going on like week 6 of no anxiety medicine. And I was like, wow, God, this is so great. Like, this is what it's all about right here. I didn't even ask for that, right? I didn't even ask, hey, God, I asked about the marriage thing. I did ask about that. I never asked, hey, God, my anxiety, could you do something about that? I didn't ask for that. He just did it, right? Because that's how good God is to each one of us. So I just want to encourage you guys today. I hope that that resonated with you, and I hope that, that's what a testimony is all about, You're going through something and you're telling other people about it and the goodness of God, and it sets people free. Because your testimony has power like that. When you say it, and God said, and I say, God healed me of my anxiety, you can take that for yourself. God healed my marriage, you can take that for yourself. But what I want to encourage you today is seek the presence of God in your life. Seek the presence of God in your life. We talk about, okay, that's great, Wes. What's a practical way to do that? Worship Him. Worship means turn your affection towards Him. And worship Him until you can feel His presence. I had a friend the other day, and they were going through something. They were going through all this stuff, and they said, just my problems overwhelm me. My problems overwhelm me. I was like, you have to get to a spot where you worship God bigger than your problems. When you get to a spot where you can worship God bigger than your problem, that's when it starts to minimize. There's a scripture that says, when He becomes greater, I must become less. And I said that scripture wrong one time. I was up here and I said that scripture wrong. I said, we must decrease so that God will increase. And that sounds really good. But Pastor Al stopped me afterwards. He was like, hey, you read that scripture wrong. And I was like, no. He's like, I did that too. So I just want to pass on the information that it says, no, when you lift Him high, you decrease. When you lift Him high, your problems decrease. When you lift Him high, the things you're worried about go strangely dim. When you lift Him high, things change. Your life changes. Everything changes in that moment. So I just want to encourage you today, as we close this, seek God and the presence of God for your life, because you'll never be the same. It's where everything happens. It's where everything changes. And once you have an experience with God like that, there's nothing people can do to change it. Just like my friend, he's like, oh, no. I've done church, I've done these things, I've tried hymns, I've tried all this stuff, but I'm telling you right now, I know God exists because of that moment, and that moment changed me for the rest of my life, and I'll never be the same. And that's what it's all about, moments like that in our life. But I want to encourage you, that is available to you all the time. It's available to you all the time if we just search after it. Amen? I want to pray for you guys. It is awesome. I want to pray for you guys today that you would encounter God like that. And maybe you have, like I had so many times, but maybe you're distracted. And He's saying, that's a good portion. That's a really good portion. But choose the portion like Mary. Choose the portion like Mary. Sit at my feet for a minute and let me give you some revelation, some power-changing moments in your life that will change your life forever. Let me do that for you. Take the distractions away for a minute and spend time with me and worship me. Not because you need something, because I'm really that worthy to be praised.